Page 198. In many businesses, accounts are kept by machines and the records are photographed. When there are millions of different facts to be taken into account and records of them to be made, machines can work far more quickly than people. The newest and greatest accounting machines can do far more work in a minute than the quickest human could do in a year. But the machines and the questions put to them come out of human minds and are controlled by us. Page 199. It was James Watt who in 1788 invented the flyball governor for steam engines as a way of making the engine able to keep control over its own rate of motion. This was the invention which made the steam engine a safe machine. The two balls are kept flying round and round by the motion of the engine. As it goes more quickly, they fly farther out, and this shuts down the supply of steam coming to the engine from the boiler. When the engine goes more slowly, the balls fly lower, and this opens up the shutoff valve and lets more steam through the pipe to the engine. Page 200. The governor of a steam engine took its name from the fact that it governs the engine as a government governs a country. A government in a free country is a group of men and women to whom the people give the power to govern them. In free countries, there is government of the people, by the people, for the good of the people. The government is the instrument by which the country controls itself. In a free country, the people can change the government. They can take the power away from one group and give it to another. And there is a limit to the powers that any government is given or can take. Page 201. In a free country, the men and women in the government are dependent upon the people and responsible to them for the use made of the power which has been given them. In any good system of government, there must be ways of controlling and limiting the amount of power anyone has, as the flyball governor controls and limits the output of the steam engine. One of the chief controls over the power of a government is the law of a country. The law is a body of statements about what may be done to or by any person. In free countries, all people are equal under the law, which they are responsible for keeping. To help them to keep it there are police and judges. Page 202. Our bodies govern themselves in many ways, but we have to control them consciously too. We have to be their judges and police when necessary. But in a well-governed country, there is little work for police and judges. A good education develops the power of people to govern themselves in more and more complex ways. As population increases and as people become more responsible for meeting their needs on a larger and larger scale, machines become more important. As the facts become more complex, machines are being used more and more to do all sorts of measuring, counting, and controlling. Can machines think? In a sense, yes. In another sense, no. They can answer a question if we have built into them the power to answer that sort of question. Page 203. We can make machines work for us, but machines cannot tell us what that work should be. It is people who are responsible for the direction of the work. A person has to know not only how to do things, but whether to do them and when. A machine has only to do what it is made to do. Free men and women have to make up their own minds about all important questions. How does one learn to do this? By being with, talking to, and watching others who are able to think for themselves. One may see how to think for oneself. One gets better at it by trying. Education in this cannot start too early. Page 204. How do people come by their ideas about what is better and what is worse? About what things are important in life, what unimportant? How do they judge between things? We have grown to what we are out of the past. We have come a very long way through change and growth from the first living cells. All living things, however simple, control themselves to some degree. Many cannot be said to have ideas, but they have direction. Within limits, they have self-control. Page 205. Thinking is the most complex sort of self-control, and our brains, with which we think, are the most complex systems of feedback. The thermostat and the flyball governor are about the simplest of them. In feedback systems, effects control their causes. In the thermostat feedback circle, the effect of increased input of fuel is increased output of heat. This effect feeds back through the thermostat and cuts down the input of fuel when the increase becomes too great. In the flyball governor circle, the effect of more steam is more output of work from the engine. This effect feeds back through the governor and cuts down the steam when the engine goes too fast. In the brain, millions of feedback circles are always controlling one another. Page 206. Our past is a very small part of all time, but it is a very important part. How old are the stars? How old are the sun and the earth and the moon? Nobody knows for certain. It is not possible at present to be certain about such great questions as these, but two things seem probable. The universe is about 5 billion years old. It has been becoming more and more complex from the start. Page 207. However we try to think of time, it seems certain that the earth is older than our minds can take in. Things have been going on for a longer time than we can think of, and they will go on and on through a longer time in the future than we can think of. 70 years seems a long lifetime if compared with the present minute, but if compared with the age of a stone, it seems no time at all. There is a Chinese poem which says, "Quickly the years fly past forever. Here forever is this spring morning." Page 208. We have to think of time and space together, here and now, there and then. We cannot see with our eyes how far off in time and space the stars are, but astronomers can measure their distances. Their unit of measure is the light year, the distance light travels through space in a year. The greatest telescopes of today let us look 2 trillion light years out into space. The stars we see there are 2 trillion light years away. We see them as they were 2 trillion years ago. We are looking into the past. Page 209. Let this curving line represent growth from simple to complex in the world. In this picture, the past is to the left, and we men and women of today are at the top of the curve. Long, long ago, the only sorts of changes that took place were, so scientists say, very simple, in comparison with the changes which are taking place in you now as you read this. The curve represents the change from simple to complex. The higher it goes, the more complex are the sorts of changes which are taking place. Page 210. In the beginning, as long ago, as far back in the past as we can talk about, the only sorts of changes which took place, scientists say, were physical changes. They were the sorts of changes which the science of physics is about. Here is a wheel turning round. Its motion is a physical change. Here is water boiling, and here is water turning into ice. Here are clouds forming and rain falling. These are physical changes. Page 211. Much later, other sorts of changes, more complex than these, began to take place. Here is a lighted candle. As it burns, the heat melts the candle, and the liquid goes up into the flame where it is turned into gas. So far, all is physical. But in the flame, chemical changes take place. Carbon from the candle and oxygen from the air come together to make carbon dioxide. At the same time, water is given off, as you may see if you hold a glass cover over the flame. The cover quickly becomes clouded with little drops of water. This water was not in the wax, and the candle flame gives it off however dry the air is. The water and carbon dioxide come into being through the chemical exchanges between the lighted candle and the air, which make the flame. At the same time, there are physical changes taking place. The top of the candle is melting, and the liquid fuel is moving up into the flame and being turned into gas. Air is coming into the flame. Carbon dioxide and water are moving up from it, and heat and light are being given out. Page 212. When you step on a scale, the scale goes down, and the springs inside it are pulled out, and the pointer moves to a mark. These changes are physical. When you look at the pointer to see what your weight is, rays of light come from it to your eye and go through the lens in your eye to a point on the retina. Page 213. In a camera, rays of light from whatever you are photographing make an upside-down picture on the film. So it is inside your eye. The pictures made on the retina are upside down. Everything going on so far has been physical, but in your retina, more complex sorts of changes now take place. Some of these are chemical. Complex materials in the retina go through chemical changes, not very unlike those that make photographs on films, and these changes cause other much more complex sorts of changes in the living cells of the retina. Page 214. These nerves, which make us able to see, are an outgrowth from the brain to the retina. From the eye, impulses travel to the brain through the living cells of the nerves. There are as many as 1 million separate telephone lines in these nerves alone. A train of changes goes up these nerves to the back part of the brain. The cells there let us see the things that our eyes are looking at. No one at present has any idea of how they do this. The distance from the eye to the back of the brain is not great, but some distances from some parts of the body to the brain are long. The rate at which impulses travel through the nerves is about the same for all of them. Page 215. The distance from one's toe to one's brain and back may be as much as 12 feet. When you are feeling with your toe for a step to put your weight on, the impulses have to go up your nerves from your toe to your brain and back down again to the muscles which move your foot. When you are walking, almost all the muscles in your body are at work, keeping you from falling down. Your muscles and nerves work together to keep you on your feet. These changes in the nerve and muscle cells are dependent on what is going on in other cells in the body in many different ways. Page 216. Life on Earth began, it is thought, about 2 billion years ago. No one knows for certain whether there are living things on other planets. On the red planet Mars, for example, or on any of the 10 million planets like the Earth, which are now thought to be traveling round other stars which are like our Sun. It seems possible, even probable, that there are living beings on many of them. Changes of color on Mars are seen at different times of the Martian year. These changes may be caused by the growth of plants. The newest and highest development of living things on Earth is human life. About 1 million years ago, early men and women were beginning something new in the long story of the Earth. Page 217. Let us change our time scale and make this line represent 500,000 years, the time since human life began. Then this curve may represent the next great steps forward into more complex ways of living. No one knows for certain when speech began. Probably speech developed slowly and in different ways and at different times with different sorts of people. But certainly it was through being able to speak to one another that we became human. With the growth of language, a great development of the parts of the brain which are used in talking took place. Speech gave us greater and greater control over the world, over others, and over ourselves. Without language, we would not have become what we mean by the word human. Page 218. Let us change our time scale again and make our line represent 10,000 years. The next great upward turn of our curve came some 2,500 years ago. In many different parts of the earth, people were discovering then their first full and clear ideas of themselves and of their world. In Greece, the great poem The Iliad, and Socrates and Plato. In Palestine, Amos, Hosea, and Isaiah. You may not make for yourself an image of anything in the sky or on earth or in the waters under the earth. Page 219. In India, Gautama Buddha and the Bhagavad Gita. In China, Confucius and Mencius. At first, through the spoken word and then in writing, we began to make for ourselves pictures of ourselves and of what we should become. More than some know, we have been living by these pictures ever since. If you have read this book up to this point, you can easily read for yourself The Wrath of Achilles, in simple English, The Republic of Plato, in simple English, and the books of Amos, Hosea, and Isaiah in the Bible in basic English. Page 220. Here are some of the greatest sayings of all time, which, in one language or another, go on living in people's minds. For many centuries, school children in China began to learn to read with this sentence. Human nature is good. Mencius. From the Changyong. What makes us is named our nature. What directs our nature is named the way. What makes the way possible is education. Page 221. From the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Yajnavalkya said, You cannot see the seer of seeing it, or hear the hearer of hearing, or think the thinker of thought, or know the knower. This is self. Your own self lives in the hearts of all. From the Apology of Socrates. I do nothing, men of Athens, but go about telling you, young and old, not to care for your bodies or your property so much as for your souls. Socrates was speaking to the Athenians who were making up their minds to put him to death. Socrates was the first man to talk of the soul in the sense in which we have used the word since then. Page 222. At first, writing seems to have been chiefly a way of keeping records. The first great poems, the Iliad, for example, were in the minds and mouths of poet after poet before they were written down. The teachings of Buddha, of Mencius, Confucius, and the earlier Hebrews were given first by the spoken word, and written down later by some who heard them. Socrates, though he used books, thought that teaching should be by word of mouth and by example. And Jesus taught only by what he said and did and was. Later, the written word was to become the chief instrument through which we could try to understand ourselves and our world. Page 223. It is chiefly through reading and through thought about what we read that we come to see how our ideas depend on one another, very much as we are dependent upon others, or as organs in our bodies are interdependent. Through reading and reflection, we can learn to know ourselves. Reflect for a while on these words of Shakespeare. Thinking, he says, turns not to itself, till it has traveled and is mirrored there, where it may see itself. Some very good students of Shakespeare think that he wrote married, not mirrored, in line 110. Page 224. Every idea with which we reflect is what it is, and can do what it can do only because our other organs of thought are what they are and do their own work. The parts of this bridge do what they do only because the other parts of it are there and are doing their work. And this is equally true of the words in a language. Every word is able to work as it does only because other words work with it. In every step we take, what any of our muscles can do depends on what our other muscles are doing. And all this is possible only because our nerve cells are in control. And nerve cells can work together well only if the blood is serving them well. Page 225. And the blood can serve them well only if the heart is in good order, and if the lungs are taking in enough oxygen. And the heart and lungs in turn are dependent on the food the stomach can give the bloodstream, and on the control the nervous system can keep up over all the organs of the body. Page 226. But in fact, the organization of our bodies is far more complex than this short and simple account can say. In everything we do, every breath we take, every motion we make, from the directing of our eyes as we look to the wording of a sentence as we write, billions of cells of every sort in our bodies are working together serving one another. It is the same with us and our world. Any great question coming up in any part of the world today has its effect on almost everyone, anywhere. As with the body, damage in any part is damaging to all the rest. The more we reflect upon this, the more we will understand why world organization is important. We are far more dependent upon one another than we know. What to do, said Confucius. In truth, I do not know what to do with a man who does not ask himself this. Wise people go on asking themselves what to do all their lives. It is 2 questions. 1. What should I want to be or to become? What is our end or purpose? We have seen how far we have come. Where are we going? 2. How can I best work to this end? Page 227. Everything, said Aristotle, has its own true work or purpose, the work it can do best, the work which is right for it. A good wheel turns well. A good knife cuts well. A good clock keeps time well. A good apple tree gives good fruit. A good cow gives good milk. In the body, eye, hand, foot, each has its own work to do. What can we do best? What is our own work as a person? Is it to learn? To learn what? Is it to learn what to do? How does one learn? Is it by the feedback from the effects of what one does? Is it by seeing from the outcome whether one is doing the right thing? Page 228. If you are trying to draw a circle, the curved line you have made keeps telling you how to go on. You can learn to draw better by trying. If you are making a speech, what will you go on to say depends on what you have said up to that point and upon the people listening to you. A bad speaker is one of whom this is not true. A good speaker has learned by experience how to design a speech and how to change the design if necessary. In speaking, as in everything we do, the way we begin depends upon what our purpose is, upon what we are trying to do. But we are not always, nor need we be, fully conscious of what that purpose is. Sometimes, in reflection, we see more purpose than we knew in what we did. Page 229. How you start your circle depends on how large it is to be. So there is feed forward as well as feedback. Feed forward is as widely supported a fact as feedback. Any number of examples can be found. There can be no feedback without feed forward. Knowledge of what you have done and are doing will not help you unless there is direction in what you are trying to do. You may not fully know what this direction is. You may be trying to find out what it is. As the development of the microscope has increased our power to see, so the development of instruments of thought is increasing our power to design and direct and see what we are doing. Page 230. In every sentence you write, the feedback from the letters of any word you are writing, together with your knowledge of the spelling of the word, tells you which letter to write next. But feedback can do this only because you fed forward that word, and no other has the word you would write. And in writing any sentence, feedback from the words you have written can tell you what to write next only because you fed forward that sentence. And you fed forward that sentence only because of a more general feed forward, the purpose of the paragraph in which the sentence is to take part, and the paragraph too depends upon the chapter and the chapter on the book. General? What does this word mean? Each of these circles, as they go out from you, represents a more general idea than all that is within. Page 231. Every breath we take is controlled by feed forward and feed back. If you want to be heard at the back of the room, you take a deeper breath as you speak. And why do you want to be heard? What part does what you have to say take in your larger purposes, and in the larger purposes still in which you take part? Before life came up out of the sea, it seems probable that there was no free oxygen or carbon dioxide in what is now the air. The gases necessary for life on land were put into the air, scientists think, little by living things themselves. What overall purpose is there of which all our purposes are parts? Here is a rough copy of one of the greatest works of William Blake. It represents design at work beginning to give order to the world. Page 232. John Amos Comenius was, so far as we know, the first man to use pictures in books written for beginning readers and for beginners in a second language. He was to have been the first head of Harvard College, where this book is being written, but could not come. Comenius began his reader Orbis Pictus with this picture. The teacher is saying, "Come, boy, learn to be wise." And the boy asks, "What does this mean, to be wise?" The teacher answers, "To understand rightly, to do rightly, and to speak out rightly all that is necessary." Page 233. The teacher gives the boy an answer, though he knows that no one can become wise all in a minute. All our lives through, we go on learning how to understand rightly, to do what is right, and to speak out at the right time. See the size of the question the boy is asking? In this book, we have not tried to give any answers, but only to bring together some of the more important ideas and facts needed if we are to ask ourselves what we should know and think and feel and desire and do. To have been wise is to have known, thought, felt, desired, and done as was best. But there are many different ways of knowing, thinking, feeling, desiring, and doing. Which are the best? That is the question. Our lives are our attempts to find an answer, and language is the most important of all our instruments for this purpose.